Coming in, I spent a lot of time thinking about what are the drivers of our industry and can I structure my team in line with the drivers to then have one person focus on one driver for growth. I have to say that thinking evolved, but the one thing that was true is we completely changed the organization in terms of positions and structure, even ways of working. But the one thing that was very true though is the people inside it, they were phenomenal. They knew we were going to go through a transformation. They were part of it and they gave a ton of input. I think the best ideas actually came from the team saying like, look, we can do this. We can do it a lot better. There's everything else that we want to stop to be able to go faster. Um, a lot of this was with reporting. They're like, look, we're creating all these massive reports, hundreds of thousands of slides that nobody will ever read instead of focusing a little bit more on what's really happening in the business. And we just told them, okay, so do that. Uh, Stop the reporting and do that. And there was a bit of fear at the beginning. They're like, wait, we can just do it that easily. And I told them, yes, it's fine. Uh, Turns out that we've transformed those reports. We don't go through them. We didn't go through them in the past. And now it's very much what's the situation and what are we going to do about it that the management team receives on a daily basis almost.
I'm Eric Fulweiler, and this is Scratch, bringing you marketing lessons from the leading brands and brains, rewriting the rulebook from scratch for the world of today. Hey everyone, my guest today is Daniel Blumer. He is the CMO of EMEA for Restaurant Brands International, which is Burger King, Popeyes, Tim Hortons, Firehouse Subs, 7,000 restaurants in the region. So this was a great conversation. I've gotten to know Daniel a little bit over the last couple months, and I was really excited for it. So I think the place that we start is probably what really affects the rest of the conversation, which is Daniel doesn't come from a marketing background. And you all will know from our Future the CMO research and all that, that his grounding in commercials, P&L management, business operations gives him such a strong foundation for how he approaches marketing and how he's been able to drive the results that he has for the business over the last 2 years. And some of the most interesting parts of the conversation were just when he stepped into the role 2 years ago, he was just like, why are we doing things this way? And a lot of the answers were because we've always done things this way. And so he talks about how he changed the approach to data, how he challenged the category incumbent playbook of how to launch new restaurants and flipped it on its head from focusing on the product first to focusing on the emotional connection and cultural relevance first and foremost. And we have a great conversation about the people side of it. He made a change, RBI made a change to go from kind of a one AOR model to a network of boutiques, now probably including Rival. And he talked about why that was, what's driven the success of that model, and how to go about finding great ideas and most importantly, great talent in the partners that you work with. So such a good episode. Know you're going to enjoy it. Without further ado, my conversation with Daniel Blumer of RBI. All right, Daniel, how are you? How are things in Zurich?
I'm really good, Eric. Really, really good. How are you?
I am good, and hopefully seeing you in France next week for Cannes. I know you're only in and out for one day, but hopefully we can make that work. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Obviously we spent some time together when I was in Zurich for our roundtable. I know that we've started on a pretty exciting project with you guys. Hopefully that's going well from your side. But when we were talking in Zurich, I think I got excited about having you on the podcast, of course, for the work that you're doing at RBI, but also just a little bit more about your background and how you got there. And having you at the round table to share it, I was like, yes, this is going to be a really interesting conversation for our audience. So before we get into all that, the icebreaker question that we ask every guest is, can you tell us about a challenger brand that you are very passionate about right now and why?
Yeah, I have to be honest with you. I thought about this one pretty hard. I typically don't get too stuck in one brand, which is kind of interesting being in marketing. Uh, But what I find a lot more interesting nowadays with a few of the challenger brands that I started to think about was they were behaving a little bit more like cultural labs, I would say, than just companies. And that started to be pretty interesting. I mean, there was examples like, taking the most boring product in the world, that's water, and then suddenly you have liquid death, and then it worked really well in the US, and it was a bit of a disaster in other places. So yeah, I would say more than specific brands, I think is the attitude.
And I'm sure that we will get into this, but knowing a bit about you and your approach, that's very much something that you've taken to stepping into the CMO role at RBI in EMEA.
Yeah, that's right. So it's something that, I started thinking about it and probably looked through my own lens, but it is something that I think is really important for brands nowadays. I mean, we all know lives are pretty busy, so we have to show up in a credible and unique way to connect with guests.
Awesome. All right. So I'm sure that we will come back and talk about that. And I really want to try to get into like the how, if you have the insight of like brands need to be more like culture labs, how do you actually do that? But before we go there, folks listening, maybe some, maybe even most have not heard of RBI, Restaurant Brands International, but they've definitely heard of the brands within your portfolio and within your responsibility. So can you please give us an overview on the RBI business and house of brands that you're responsible for right now?
Yeah, of course. So RBI stands for Restaurant Brands International. So it's the brand owner of four pretty iconic brands. One that I'm sure most of the people know, which is Burger King. Then we have Tim Hortons, Popeyes, and most recently Firehouse Subs as well. And our job is really as the franchisors, we want to bring these brands all around the world. Uh, that's what we're focused on.
Love it. And I know when I visited the office, I got to see the test kitchen. Unfortunately, I didn't get to eat anything, but I know that's one of the perks of the job in the role that you have. All right, so let's get into it. So it was interesting, when we sat down and I was like, here's the show, here's what we talk about, what's on your mind. And actually, the first place that you started when I asked about like what is the mind map for you as CMO was actually going back to when you stepped into this role and what you've done differently since. And like I kind of hinted at before, your background is not typical for a CMO, although you've been at RBI for 11 years. So I guess, why don't you give everybody kind of like a brief headline of the chapters of your career that led you to where you are? And, of course, what you've done differently, but why was that the first reaction to my question of what's on your mind map? What you've actually changed since you've gotten there?
Yeah, so indeed, been in RBI for 11 years, and the last two was CMO, but I had never probably officially been in marketing, which is kind of odd when you think about it. Did a bit of everything, so franchising development, operations in that time. Uh, and the reason I started with what I've done differently is because I don't think you would put somebody who doesn't come from marketing to keep running things the same way. Um, and I think stepping in, we found two things. Number one was we were gathering data from every restaurant. Like think about it, we have more in the case of international, over 7,000 restaurants. Uh, we're getting data from every transaction, all these guests every day, and we were still looking at it the same way we looked at it 10 years ago. So that seemed a little bit odd. And the first thing we did was we said, okay, if we want to look at every restaurant, every guest, how can we process all of that and we transform the business to go a little bit more specific, a little bit more granular, and just on tap a ton of growth. Uh, and then the other thing was coming from one of the smaller brands, right? So I spent the majority of my time at Burger King, but then I worked on the launch of Popeyes in Europe. One of the things that we did there was understand the role of culture and the importance of kind of how we show up in consumers' lives. We call them guests. Uh, and so one of the ways that we started thinking was how can we bring a little bit of that into all of our brands because it seems to create very powerful connections. I think I mentioned this to you, but if the theory says you start very functional and then you go emotional, we're actually starting to see a little bit more success when you actually double down on the emotional communication at the beginning to build that connection with guests today.
So let's unpack both of those. What you
Mhm.
changed in terms of how the business and the marketing team approaches data, and then also kind of how you challenged or even flipped the incumbent category conventional playbook for how you launch and scale restaurants and locations. So on the data side of it, one of the things I thought was interesting, obviously your business has tremendous scale across the region and across the world, but you're focused on EMEA, 7,000 restaurants. And I think a lot of businesses, even if they aren't at that scale, can probably relate to this. You said that you realized that y'all were too focused on the averages. So what did you see that led you to that conclusion? And then what did you replace it with? What was kind of the new framework or the new philosophy about data?
Mhm. That's a really good question. So I think when I said that we look at averages, if you assume that every restaurant in a country is average, you're leaving a huge opportunity on the table, which is every restaurant is the one restaurant for a 5 minute universe of guests or consumers that visit that restaurant. And every single one of those restaurants is different. So if we're looking at only averages, you're gonna leave the real insight, the real truth of what's going on the table. It's easier because it's a lot of information, but then we started focusing a little bit more on what happens when we look at what are the things that are different and special, and then from there, can we understand what drives differences in performance? I mean, I'm sure like in every business, we have some places that do really well and some that don't, even within the same restaurant. And we started unpacking, okay, what are the drivers for those things? And how can we make sure that we scale those learnings to all of our franchisee partners?
Hey everyone, just another quick interruption. If you're listening to this podcast and you're not already part of our AMP community on WhatsApp, would love for you to get involved. So AMP is a community that we started at the beginning of the business, really, just to kind of bring together some of the interesting people that we were talking to, the marketers that we were coming across, many of whom have been on this show as well. And so now AMP is about 300 senior marketers from around the world, from various categories, different stages, challengers, incumbents. And it's really a place where people can share questions, can share resources, can make new connections, can use folks as sounding boards. And for those that are in it, you know, it is a very vibrant community. It's really taken on a life of its own, which is amazing. So if you're listening to this and you want to get involved, please go to our website, weareRival.com. There you can find the application form or reach out to me or someone at Rival directly. Thanks so much. And when it comes to the functional emotional and how you kind of flip that on its head. So if the incumbent playbook for launching a restaurant was to first focus on the product and then try to build emotional connection, you, and this goes, of course, back to what you said in the icebreaker, thought first about the emotional connection and the cultural relevance, finding a way to build that connection, drive trial, word of mouth. And of course, the product is there, but you know, you kind of prioritize that. And I think it's interesting because that definitely supports, as you know, a lot of the research and the approach that we have about the importance of cultural relevance, which has always been there, but also how a brand needs to build cultural relevance has changed the whole microcultures kind of playbook that we have. So tactically, how do you actually go about trying to build emotional connection and cultural relevance when you launch a new location or even around existing locations?
Yeah. So I have a benefit over many people out there, which is that we already have pretty iconic brands, at least in one place when we buy them, right? Yep. So if we think about our BI's model, we'll go and buy what we believe is the best food in the category that we play in. So if you think about Burger King, we believe it's the best burgers. If you think about Popeyes, it's the best chicken. That existed. If you think about Tim's, hopefully best coffee. And then if we think about Firehouse, the best subs. So every single one from a taste profile is a leader in its category. And that means that there's a very core group of consumers that are huge fans of the brand. So that iconicity and that cultural relevance already exists. And these brands have been around for a really long time. My job then becomes a lot easier, which is I can either bring the food or I can bring everything that has been built around it and just let people try the food. And the first time we did this, bringing brands around the world, we kind of went the first way and we went kind of product first. We learned a lot. We need to have the right product and replicate the same experience. However, if you take something that nobody knows, even if it's really good and you put it in a new place, they don't know it. And Popeyes was a big revealing moment where we understood that the brand was bigger than what we thought it was. And it was just a cultural icon. We started realizing a lot of people talk about it organically. So we said, okay, how do we build that? And that became the brief. So the baseline was we need to have the same food and the best food in our category. The new thing was we know we have an icon. We need to replicate what created the icon in the home market, in the majority of cases, the US.
That's interesting. And how does that, like, tactically, I would imagine that changed a lot of things. But when it comes to kind of the strategy around communication, activation in market, did that change like how you wrote briefs, what you were looking for in an agency partner? What are the differences in how, you know, Burger King or Popeyes or one of your brands shows up in the world with this changed philosophy?
Yeah, it definitely changed a lot of things. Again, product's still at the center, but on the brief side, we made a lot less emphasis on having to talk about the product. We made that a given. And we emphasized a lot what made the brand itself special. Um, that was the first aspect. The second aspect, I would say, was when we were thinking about agencies, we involved them now actually a little bit later. We realized we had to do a lot more of the hard thinking ourselves. Uh, and we started interacting a lot more with very senior executives in the restaurant industry and get their takes. Some more getting, I would call it more consulting experiences rather than agency inputs early on, and then going with richer briefs to the agencies.
So, a lot of this approach and how you've taken on and evolved the CMO role within
Mhm.
RBI comes from your background and your perspective. Again, not coming from advertising, not even coming from marketing, but coming from kind of more that GM background, which, as you know, is, of course, one of the key findings of what we think makes effective CMOs, and certainly how the future of the role hopefully will evolve is that like marketing is a means to an end. It's about owning the commercial results. So I really liked kind of how you talked about the three pillars of your role: sales, budget, and market share. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? And also knowing for your business, it's not just brand to consumer or brand to guest. It's also, of course, the whole franchise model. So how does that play out in how you view your role relative to franchisees as well?
Yeah, it's interesting. I have to say, when we had the roundtable dinner, it got me really thinking. A part of the conversation was around B2B used to learn from B2C, and we used to think we're in B2C. We're actually in B2B2C. So there's a bit of complexity there, and we have to learn a lot of that. Uh, and the reason I'm kind of going after that is in my world, we have to, our client is our franchisee, but our consumer is the guest. It's a little bit different. Um, and so for our clients to be successful, I need to be delivering the growth targets that we've set. So that's where the budget really comes in. We need to be working on that because that's the minimum. That's what our partners signed up for when they bought the franchise. Obviously, growing sales is kind of baseline because it means that we're achieving growth. Uh, and then the last piece is market share, which is more, we're here to build the most iconic restaurant brands in the world, the most loved. That means it has to come with growth. It has to come with scale, and we know the power of scale. I think what's unique is what we've discovered is when one of those things fail, typically the CMO starts to get a lot of pressure at the time. But most importantly, uh, not it doesn't take so long for all the others to start to fall apart. So that's a little bit more the warning sign where the house is about to break. You better do something now, or it will break. And then if it does break, there's no more podcasting for me.
Hey everyone, I wanted to quickly jump in and ask a question that I'm sure all of you have thought of. What does the future of the CMO role actually look like? Is it evolving? Is it going extinct? Like a lot of businesses seem to think it is. We have put out our very first documentary as Rival titled The Future of the CMO. You can check it out via the link in the show notes below. We have interviewed some of the biggest and brightest minds in the marketing industry to understand what the future of this role actually looks like. Would love for you to check it out. Would love to hear what you think. Link in the show notes below. Yeah, that'll be the first thing to go, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear, well, I've heard it before, but for our audience, I really like how you think about kind of balancing. You've got kind of like your three pillars of sales, budget, and market share. But then if you look at a different dimension, you have to deliver on both the short and the long term.
Mhm.
So how do you think about that? Short and long term, both for the brand, but of course, commercial results, and then long term building the brands and the future potential and future revenue for the business.
Yeah. So I think about it this way. RBI at the end of the day is looking to build the most iconic brands in those places, and we look for the best people that we believe can help us do that. Uh, Now, that means that we go through a lot of brand custodians with our franchisees at the moment. Uh, but over time, we know a lot of them come and go, and they come with an investment thesis, and they'll leave with that as well. We know that RBI today owns the brand, but we haven't owned these brands forever. We want to own them forever going forward, but we haven't owned them forever. The one constant in consumers' minds is it doesn't matter who owns these things. It's still Burger King, it's still Popeyes, Tim Hortons, or Firehouse Subs. So with that, the role I try to take within the organization is how do we make sure always that we're thinking about the best brand in that specific country in the long term, right? So if I think about in the case of Switzerland, if I'm talking to the Burger King Switzerland team, I'm thinking about the Burger King brand in Switzerland, which should in turn yield good benefits for the franchisee, for RBI, and for the brand in long term. So that's a little bit my role. Some people don't like it because many times things that can deliver immediate short term, I'm the one person standing in between them and achieving that. But in the long term, it really proves to be the right thing to do. And we want to own this brand forever.
I'm curious, I know this isn't a question in the brief, but with everything that we've talked about and really the starting point of our conversation was how you took a different approach, changed the model in a way when you stepped into
Mhm.
the role. The people side of it internally, did you have to make a lot of changes? And I don't necessarily mean like firing people or hiring people, although, if that was part of what you needed to do, of course, that'd be relevant, but also just kind of changing mindset and processes. Because I would imagine, I know RBI runs relatively lean, but still it's a big organization.
Mhm.
How did you approach kind of driving through the cultural change and any changes to talent that were necessary to kind of adopt the model of what you wanted to roll out?
Yeah. Coming in, I spent a lot of time thinking about what are the drivers of our industry and can I structure my team in line with the drivers to then have one person focus on one driver for growth. I have to say that thinking evolved, but the one thing that was true is we completely changed the organization in terms of positions and structure, even ways of working. But the one thing that was very true though is the people inside it, they were phenomenal. They knew we were going to go through a transformation. They were part of it and they gave a ton of input. I think the best ideas actually came from the team saying like, look, we can do this. We can do it a lot better. There's everything else that we want to stop to be able to go faster. Um, a lot of this was with reporting. They're like, look, we're creating all these massive reports, hundreds of thousands of slides that nobody will ever read instead of focusing a little bit more on what's really happening in the business. And we just told them, okay, so do that. Uh, Stop the reporting and do that. And there was a bit of fear at the beginning. They're like, wait, we can just do it that easily. And I told them, yes, it's fine. Uh, Turns out that we've transformed those reports. We don't go through them. We didn't go through them in the past. And now it's
Yep.
very much what's the situation and what are we going to do about it that the management team receives on a daily basis almost. Um, so that's been really cool, I would say. We came in with an idea, but the team had a better one, I would say. When they had the ideas, we just let them do it.
I'm just reflecting as you're talking about how often the answers to various questions in various ways really come down to I brought a fresh perspective. And the whole reason this podcast is called Scratch is because, of course, we talk about challenger marketing, but really it's not just about the size of the stage of the business. It's about approaching marketing from scratch for the world of today and what's going to be most effective.
Yeah.
And so often, what we hear from, and I'm very conscious of survivorship bias because, of course, we're interviewing the success stories, but, maybe there were some in other organizations who came in with a fresh perspective that was wrong. But you do need that balance of understanding the realities of the business and kind of the load bearing structures of what you need to do, but then coming in with a fresh, innovative way that usually ends up basically, like you said, with the 1,000-page deck or whatever, cutting out anything that doesn't directly tie the value of the product or service to the needs that exist in the market.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to draw that out and kind of underline it for people listening because it's something that doing this is hard to believe that's part of my job because I get to sit here and learn from folks like you, which is great on its own. But then the benefit of now having done 150 of these or whatever it is, just seeing the kind of red threads and the patterns is it's great. Definitely a perk of the job.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. If there's one more thing I would highlight is the majority of
Yeah.
times for a really hard problem, your team usually knows the answer. It's just a question of have
Mhm.
you asked them? Um, and when I say the team is, many times it's, oh, this product didn't work. This is my reality. And then a bunch of people in the office doing a bunch of analysis, but then turns out you just get on a plane, go to that restaurant, you ask the crew member, and they tell you like it didn't work operationally. many times it's as simple as that. They just go down to the closest person to the consumer, as
Yep.
close as you can get. I mean, if you can get to the consumers, even better. Typically, that's where the answer is. It's
Yeah.
just about how much are you looking for it.
That is definitely another one of the key patterns that I hear in these interviews is just some version of we spend more time with the customer. We listen directly to what they have to say. Again, we cut out the fat between what we're thinking about doing and what the customer actually says he or she actually needs. So Daniel, coming into the third and final chapter of the conversation, obviously you're not doing all of this yourself. You do have an agency partner network that you lean on. And of course, we first met to talk about doing some work together um, during, and I know it was a little bit later on, you'd already made the change, but of course you got rid of the traditional kind of one AOR model and started looking for folks like us, like more specialized boutiques that could be the right fit for the right job, smaller, senior, nimble teams, etc. So why did you change things to that extent? And what has been the kind of pros and cons of shifting from the, one AOR to network of more specialized boutique partners?
Yeah. Really good question. So I'll start with what we lost, right? We had a team of people that had been with us in this journey for a long time.
Yeah.
So they understood the brand in depth. Um, and we knew we were going to go through this process. Um, Having said that, I think for us, it was time to, move the power a little bit closer to the market, right? Give them the ability to do a lot more. Our job is not to tell them what to do. Then if that was the case, we wouldn't have a team in every market leading the brand for themselves. So when we said that, then we said, why would we need to have an agency working for us full time rather than our job is to make sure we're giving them the best tools. And that means that we need to bring divergent thinking many times and new opportunities that normal agencies just wouldn't have the depth of knowledge that we needed. So we needed something a little bit more specialized, a little bit more expert, a little bit more disruptive as well sometimes of our traditional thinking. Uh, so we decided to go that route. And at the end of the day, I think about it as we just gained a lot more voices we can learn from. And it has its costs, and it's a little bit messier, but in the end, it's proving out to be better for us.
Hey everyone, just want to take a quick minute because we've actually heard from many of you that you want to get a better understanding of what it is that we actually do here at Rival. You know us for the content. Obviously, you're listening to Scratch right now, but everything else that we put out, the events, the community, but actually our core business, just so you know, we are a marketing consultancy for challenger brands. We partner with brands big and small to gain category share with a challenger approach. We develop and execute strategies and campaigns across four main areas of the marketing function: brand strategy, creative and production, paid media planning and buying, and customer data and MarTech. And then, of course, as you know, the mission that's wrapped around Rival is to understand and share our learnings about what drives the growth of successful challenger brands. That's it. Sorry for the interruption. I'll let you get back to the show. Yeah, I was actually talking to somebody earlier. Now I can't remember who it was. Somebody on the brand side talking about because this is a broader shift that we are seeing, is big brands that are, not committing to one AOR, especially on the creative and strategy side. Paid media is a little bit different. And looking for businesses like us, to be honest, of course, there are so many of them, but moving to more boutiques. And I was like, I think your point about the consistency of the team and people that have been in the business for a long time is a great one. But I think the biggest con and the biggest thing that you need to account for, because you can certainly see the upside, is just if you're managing one partner with one group account director, whoever it is, like the one person you can go to who you know is going to fix all your problems if there's an issue, versus having to manage 10. Have you staffed that differently? Like, how have you gone about accounting for that additional, I would imagine, load on the team?
So we didn't. The difference, I think, for us is we already had the benefit that we have local agencies in every market because we have, we operate very market driven. So our CMOs in every market have their own agencies of record. They do have. So we already had the complexity. And we just said, we already know how to do this. We know how to do this at scale. It didn't really add that much difference for us.
So then that's an advantage. And my interpretation of that is you had an advantage compared to other organizations that you were already set up this way. and therefore could kind of double down on it because there was less of a con with all the pro. It's really interesting, especially for people in businesses listening that might have that kind of network or are already staffed and used to working with multiple partners. Where can you apply this that's not going to be something new and super challenging for the organization to figure out? It's interesting. One of the things that you brought up at the roundtable dinner in Zurich that I thought was fascinating was, a lot of people know about, where I think, as you put it, the global CMO for Burger King previously, Fernando Machado, quote, made Burger King cool again. So a lot of people have seen those campaigns, and Burger King in many ways has come back into the zeitgeist because of that work. And when we were chatting and you were sharing at the roundtable, you talked a little bit about how Fernando was able to do that, obviously with many partners around him. Can you share what that model was like? And then also if that's something that you are thinking about applying as well.
Yeah, I think Fernando himself is a guy that he's just incredible to work with. And at the time, I remember asking him how the model worked and how he decided to do that. And he always said, "Look, I don't hire agencies; I hire great people, and I just happen to know a lot of really good people from all these agencies." And he said, he at the time was like, "Look, the best thing we can do is listen to all of them and pick the best idea." So his model was very simple. If you come to me with a really good idea, I'll invest behind it and make it happen. Now, I think the one thing that Fernando has that we have to recognize, and not everybody has, and I certainly don't have, is he just knew when the ideas were really powerful, and he was just on it every day. Um, I think that requires talent. So then you're staffing for a specific person, you're not staffing for an organization. So then when we shifted things, we decided, you know what, let's put that money that we were putting behind these big ideas into a little bit more certain, because we don't have that one big talent. So I would say if you have that one person, double down because it really works. If you don't, sitting where I'm sitting, you may want to just de-risk that big bet, because it is a big bet, but it's a huge influx of really good ideas and talent into the ecosystem. Yeah.
Yeah, I really do think so much of leadership, so much of great marketing is just following and tripling down on great talent when you find it. It's both that simple and also that hard. So to that point, kind of the last question we had in the brief was just, how do you go about finding good partners now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, a lot of what we've been going through, right? The first thing we do is we understand what's the specialization that these agencies have today, right? What are they trying to build? What's making them stand out? And then once we go from there, we decide to meet the team. I think for me, the most important thing is there real chemistry with the team, and are we feeling really good about how we're running the process to bring them in closer? Because at the end of the day, it needs to feel like you're now part of our team. So that's how we're doing it now. It's quite intense from a agency management perspective on our side and partner management. But it just makes something a lot more long lasting that we had to do.
Well, we are very humbled and happy to be part of that roster now, and hopefully we can make some great things together. So Daniel, before I let you go, quick lightning round of questions, and I will let you know you're the guinea pig for the new set of lightning round questions. So here we go. First of all, if your brand was a menu item from a Burger King restaurant, what would it be?
Oh wow! If my brand was a menu item from a Burger King restaurant, I mean, it would obviously be the Whopper.
Of course.
I mean, it's
Any
Whopper.
modifications or just
The
straight up?
Whopper. My personal favorite is a Whopper with cheese.
All right, there you go.
Yeah.
All right, what is the best marketing campaign you've seen recently?
Yeah, that's a good one. I was thinking about that. I thought what On Shoes did with Zendaya was pretty powerful. Um, I think I've seen a little bit of the journey of On in Switzerland because it's their home market. And we kind of saw the big rise in popularity and kind of starting to fade away. With them focusing in the US, I think it was really the right thing to do to sustain that momentum. The brand is cool right now in the US, and those guys are doing really well.
What is your biggest pet peeve in marketing?
Oh, people who decide to just do the same thing they've been doing before, but just then throw some media behind it and thinking it's gonna work this time. Just throw more media dollars at it. You're not gonna change anything.
what advice would you give to your younger self?
Yeah, ask for help. A lot of people out there want to help and they want to be involved. You just need to ask.
And lastly, what's the biggest missed opportunity in marketing right now?
I think people are very focused on selling, not on telling stories. And at the end of the day, what we sell is stories.
I love it. That is a great place to end it. Daniel, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much, Eric. This was awesome. Thank you.
Scratch is a production of Rival. We are a growth consultancy that builds challenger brands, strategies, and capabilities to disrupt categories. If you want to learn more about us, check out wearerival.com. If you want to connect with me, email me at eric@wearerival.com or find me on LinkedIn. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe, share with anyone you think might enjoy it, and leave us a review. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.